The 10 most expensive aviation mistakes in history. A tiny screw directly causing hundreds of deaths. The reason behind the number one mistake shocked the entire world. According to authoritative investigations, aircraft are the safest mode of transportation. However, throughout history, there have been some unexpected air disasters caused by small human errors. In this edition of Guidepedia, we'll explore the 10 most expensive aviation mistakes in the world. Subscribe now, and let's begin our journey. Peruvian Airlines Flight 603 disaster. A small piece of tape worth just 2 cents caused the crash of a Boeing 757 valued at $75 million, resulting in losses amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars. This incident shocked the entire world. On October 2nd, 1996, Peruvian Airlines Flight 603 took off from Lima International Airport in Peru. Before even leaving Peruvian airspace, the aircraft crashed due to excessive speed, killing 70 people, 61 passengers, and 9 crew members. In 1999, the company involved paid an average of $1 million in compensation to each victim's family, totaling approximately $70 million. After the accident, investigators discovered through underwater equipment research that the captain's static port had been completely sealed with tape. It turned out that maintenance personnel who had washed the aircraft had failed to remove the protective strips attached to the aircraft's fuselage, leaving them covering the static ports. Furthermore, there was no supervisor overseeing the aircraft cleaning process, and the captain's routine pre-flight inspection failed to detect the issue. These oversights led to one of the most devastating disasters in aviation history. Eventually, the technician responsible for the error was sentenced to prison for negligent homicide. Peruvian Airlines couldn't survive the impact of this catastrophe and declared bankruptcy in 1999. The tragedy of Flight 603 serves as a sobering reminder that even the smallest oversight can have devastating consequences. What makes this disaster particularly haunting is how easily it could have been prevented. A simple piece of tape, a routine check missed, a moment of carelessness. Aviation experts often cite this case when discussing the critical importance of thorough pre-flight inspections and proper maintenance protocols. The static ports, essential for providing accurate airspeed information to pilots, became the silent killers when blocked by maintenance tape that should have been removed. For the families who lost loved ones that day, no amount of financial compensation could ever fill the void left behind. Their grief was compounded by the knowledge that such a preventable error had taken everything from them. Today, the Peruvian Airlines Flight 603 disaster stands as a powerful lesson in the aviation industry, a constant reminder that in the complex world of air travel, even the smallest details can mean the difference between life and death. American Airlines Flight 191 disaster. Who could imagine that a tiny screw would mercilessly claim the lives of nearly 300 people? This tragedy occurred on May 25, 1979. American Airlines Flight 191, as usual, carried 258 passengers and 13 crew members on a flight to Los Angeles. Many were planning to skip work and enjoy the weekend, unaware that disaster was about to strike. As the aircraft's nose gradually lifted, having traveled approximately 6,000 feet down the runway, the left wing's number 1 engine detached without warning and crashed onto the runway. At that time, Flight 191 was experiencing a stall detection system failure. When the engine separated and caused the aircraft to stall, the captain failed to detect this condition, losing the critical window for potential recovery. With a deafening boom, Flight 191 crashed onto a hangar. The fuel-laden aircraft exploded immediately upon impact, sending flames skyward. All 271 people aboard, plus 2 innocent bystanders on the ground, perished. The entire sequence lasted less than 50 seconds. Preliminary investigations revealed that a bolt securing the engine had failed due to quality issues, suddenly breaking during flight. This caused the other 2 bolts to fail under the engine's weight, resulting in the engine's separation. In an instant, DC, the aircraft manufacturer, was overwhelmed by public outrage. However, after deeper investigation, Experts ultimately discovered that the sudden engine detachment on Flight 191 wasn't a quality issue. Rather, American Airlines' maintenance department had taken shortcuts during engine maintenance. They should have removed hundreds of screws, but to save over 200 hours of maintenance time and money, they cut corners. This irresponsible behavior directly cost nearly 300 innocent lives. Eventually, American Airlines' maintenance department faced not only public condemnation, but also a $500,000 fine from the U.S. government. McDonnell Douglas, the manufacturer of the ill-fated aircraft, saw its stock price plummet by 20%. The Flight 191 disaster stands as one of aviation's most sobering lessons, a stark reminder that maintenance procedures exist for a reason. What seemed like a time-saving measure to some maintenance workers became a death sentence for hundreds of unsuspecting travelers who simply wanted to reach their destinations. Years later, the images of that fiery crash near Chicago's O'Hare International Airport continue to haunt the aviation industry. The tragedy fundamentally changed maintenance protocols and oversight across the airline industry, ensuring that such shortcuts would never again be tolerated. For the families left behind, the knowledge that their loved ones died because of deliberate negligence rather than an unavoidable accident only deepened their grief. No fine or corporate punishment could ever compensate for what they lost that spring day in 1979. Colgan Air Flight 3407 disaster. We all know that whether sailing a boat or driving a car, operating while fatigued is inadvisable. This is especially true when flying an aircraft. The Colgan Air Flight 3407 disaster was a fatal commercial airline accident that occurred within the United States in 2009, resulting in 50 deaths. The incident caused immeasurable negative impact and property damage. After investigation, people discovered that the first officer, who lived in Seattle, had commuted to New York on a FedEx cargo plane, sleeping on the aircraft rather than in a proper bed. Meanwhile, the captain had spent the night before the flight in Colgan Air's crew lounge. Both pilots lacked sufficient quality sleep, leading to fatigue during flight, which caused them to make a series of abnormal actions during the stall. The black box revealed that when the aircraft was already below 10,000 feet, crew members were still discussing topics unrelated to flying, failing to notice the gradually decreasing airspeed that was approaching stall speed. Furthermore, when the aircraft entered a stall, the two crew members did not follow the stall recovery procedures to escape danger. Instead, the captain raised the aircraft's nose, causing the speed to decrease even more dramatically, directly leading to the disaster. The first officer retracted the landing gear and flaps, reducing the aircraft's lift and ultimately causing it to lose control completely. In 2012, after Continental Airlines was acquired by United Airlines, Colgan Air announced the cessation of operations. The Uberlingen mid-air collision. Two aircraft that could have landed safely instead met at the wrong time due to overlapping flight paths, ultimately crashing and causing billions of dollars in massive losses for two companies. The two aircraft involved were Bashkirian Airlines Flight 2937, originally scheduled to fly from Russia's capital Moscow to Barcelona, Spain, and DHL Express Flight 611, which was flying from Paris International Airport via Bergamo International Airport in Italy to Brussels, Belgium. However, due to an air traffic controller's error, incorrect air traffic control instructions were issued, causing the two aircraft's flight paths to overlap. At 9:35 p.m. on July 1st, 2002, they collided in the skies above Uberlingen, a Swiss city near Lake Constance in southern Germany. Later, the air traffic controller involved, Peter Nielsen, was stabbed to death in front of his home in Zurich on February 24, 2004. This tragic accident served as a wake-up call for the aviation industry at that time. Airlines across various countries mandated that when there is a conflict between Traffic Collision Avoidance System, TCAS, recommendations and air traffic control instructions, pilots should follow the TCAS guidance to prevent similar accidents from occurring again. The International Civil Aviation Organization also followed up with similar requirements. British European Airways Flight 548 disaster. A small argument led to the most devastating disaster in British civil aviation history, something even filmmakers wouldn't dare to portray. On June 18, 1972, British European Airways Flight 548 took off with a full passenger load. However, just 3 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft entered a deep stall condition. After avoiding a main road, it crashed in Staines, killing all 118 people on board. The Trident aircraft, valued at over $10 million, was reduced to scrap metal. After the incident, investigators discovered that the main cause of the crash was the captain's failure to maintain appropriate airspeed and correctly configure the aircraft's lift augmentation devices. There were also underlying issues, such as the first officer's lack of experience. It turned out that at the time, to protest the increasingly serious hijacking incidents in the 70s, the International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations announced that some captains would go on strike. This strike action caused discord among crew members, intensifying tensions between the first officer and the supervising flight engineer. Just an hour and a half before Flight 548's departure, the captain on duty had even been involved in an argument with another captain in the British European Airways staff lounge. Later, airlines registered in the United Kingdom were required to install cockpit voice recorders in their fleets. Helios Airways Flight 522 disaster. It was the most severe aviation disaster in Greek history, causing hundreds of millions of euros in massive losses. An aircraft was reduced to countless fragments, with the rescue operation alone costing millions of euros. On August 14, 2005, it was a beautiful day with clear skies. Helios Airways Flight 522 was initially proceeding extremely smoothly. Airport passengers were immersed in their own spaces. Passing time, however, as the flight duration extended and the altitude increased, abnormalities began to appear. When the flight reached an altitude of approximately 98,000 feet, the aircraft unexpectedly stopped moving forward and began circling in place. Inside the cabin, the pilots directly fell unconscious due to oxygen deprivation. Captain Hans Morton went to check the cockpit's air conditioning system. After leaving his seat, he collapsed near the air conditioning unit due to hypoxia. The other passengers on the plane experienced the same fate. Although they put on the oxygen masks that had deployed, the oxygen was quickly depleted, causing them to lose consciousness. With everyone in a state of deep unconsciousness, the aircraft crashed with the tail section hitting the ground first. The fuselage rolled for about 1,600 feet before finally coming to a stop, except for the tail section and cockpit. The rest of the aircraft was completely shattered. All 121 people on board perished. Why did everyone fall unconscious? The reason was that after completing the pressurization test on the aircraft, the maintenance personnel for Flight 522 had switched the pressurization system from manual mode back to automatic mode. When the pilots boarded the aircraft, they failed to notice this issue, directly overlooking the mode of the pressurization system. The aircraft took off without proper air pressurization. As the flight altitude increased, the oxygen in the cabin decreased progressively. After the disaster occurred, local rescue teams immediately organized personnel to participate in the rescue effort. The Greek government dispatched 35 fire trucks, 8 firefighting aircraft, 3 helicopters, and dozens of ambulances rushing to the scene, but they were unable to reverse the tragedy. Egyptair Flight 804 disaster. Who would believe that an aircraft weighing hundreds of tons could be destroyed by a tiny cigarette? After spending enormous funds and 6 years of investigation, people discovered that this is exactly how the Egyptair Flight 804 disaster of 2016 occurred. MS-804 was an international flight from Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, France, to Cairo International Airport in Egypt. On the evening of May 18, 2016, the Airbus A320 aircraft operating this flight was carrying 66 people, including 56 passengers and 10 crew members. It mysteriously crashed before landing in Egypt. All 66 people on board perished. In the initial aircraft accident investigation, Egyptian authorities attributed the crash to a terrorist attack and claimed to have found traces of explosives in the remains. However, A 2018 report by the French Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety, after analyzing the black box data, concluded that the crash was caused by a fire on the aircraft, but did not determine the specific cause of the fire. It wasn't until 2022 that the cause of the aircraft accident was officially revealed. It turned out that a pilot had been smoking in the cockpit, and the cigarette's spark ignited oxygen leaking from an emergency mask, ultimately causing a fire in the cockpit. The aircraft consequently crashed into the Mediterranean Sea. Subsequently, the Paris Court of Appeal launched an investigation into the incident on charges of involuntary manslaughter, as 15 French citizens were on board when the aircraft plunged into the sea. The Tenerife disaster. On what should have been a quiet runway, a sudden deafening explosion shattered all the glass at the airport. Incredibly, two aircraft had collided with each other amid scattered aircraft parts. One plane was struck so violently it spun twice before disintegrating on the spot, while the other immediately erupted into raging flames, burning until only wreckage remained. This was a catastrophic aviation disaster that occurred before either aircraft had even taken to the skies. The Tenerife disaster. Two Boeing 747s collided at Tenerife Island Airport, resulting in 583 deaths. It remains the deadliest aviation accident in history, causing billions of dollars in property, personnel, and equipment losses, according to reports. On March 27, 1977, Las Palmas International Airport suffered a terrorist attack. Many aircraft in flight or waiting were directed to divert to Tenerife Island Airport. Fog and congestion created chaos on the runway. The captain of KLM Flight 4805, one of the aircraft involved, requested takeoff clearance from a control tower, which was granted. Simultaneously, the tower instructed Pan Am Flight 1736, which was following behind, to taxi to another exit to clear the main runway. However, the Pan Am captain found he couldn't enter that exit and independently decided to pass the designated exit, intending to use another exit further ahead. He failed to report this decision to the tower. Consequently, when KLM Flight 4805 accelerated to approximately 200 miles per hour and emerged from the fog, Pan Am 1736 was still on the runway, under the tremendous impact. Both aircraft were knocked off the runway. Among the two aircraft, all 248 passengers on the Dutch KLM Flight 4805 perished. Of the 396 passengers on Flight 1736, 335 lost their lives, with only 61 survivors, including the captain and first officer. Aeroflot Flight 593 disaster. The aircraft was flying smoothly when suddenly it began to rise and fall in the air, performing steep turns before ultimately stalling and crashing. This was Aeroflot Flight 593, which crashed in a remote area of Siberia, Russia in the early hours of March 23, 1994. All 75 crew members and passengers on board perished. The losses from this tragedy are incalculable. The ill-fated flight was traveling from Moscow to Hong Kong, while flying at 33,000 feet above Siberia. The aircraft was on autopilot, automatically heading eastward using a sophisticated autopilot system. Suddenly, the plane turned right, with the fuselage exceeding a 45-degree angle beyond the aircraft's design load limit. This severe bank angle caused insufficient lift. After a series of struggles, the aircraft ultimately stalled and began spinning vertically downward, crashing in a mountainous area 2 minutes and 6 seconds later. After analyzing the cockpit voice recorder tapes, investigators discovered that before the incident, the first officer had brought his 2 children to the cockpit for a tour. The primary cause of the accident was that the first officer's son had turned the control stick left for over 30 seconds, which disengaged the autopilot system's directional control component, reverting to manual operation. However, because other systems were still being operated by the autopilot, when the system detected that the prolonged right turn was causing the aircraft to descend, it pulled up the nose, attempting to return to the set altitude of 33,000 feet. This triggered a series of subsequent problems, allowing an uninformed child to play in the cockpit control room. Such a reason truly left the entire world in disbelief. 3 years after the disaster, Airbus received no new orders for the A310 model and ceased production of the A310 in 2007. Aeroflot also returned all its leased A310 aircraft in 2004. After watching the videos above, which of these most expensive aviation disasters do you think was completely avoidable? Feel free to leave your comments and interact in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe and like Guidepedia. Next time, we'll bring you more fascinating content.